Hello again, it's Ken Utley of SIMS. During this video segment, we're going to be discussing the SIA format and how data entry can go about getting the full potential of this format. Before we begin, I would like to provide a little history about this format. The SIA format was first introduced into the security market in the early 1990s as an alternative format that was dominated by Ademco's Contact ID. It was originally championed by a Bill Gallinger of Cisco and a Kit Vale of Silent Night. Using a two-letter event identifier and four-digit code zone with a single-digit area identifier, it quickly allowed the SIA format to be one of the desired alternative formats in the industry. The SIA format has evolved and been divided into three levels. SIA Level 1, which allows only a single event per transfer from panel to receiver and computer, SIA Level 2, which allows multiple event transfers, and finally SIA Level 3, which adds panel-programmed language information. Let's take some time now to understand this format for all its versatility and functionality. Much like other format demonstrations that we've done, we're going to take the account Tequila Willie's, strip out all of the normal zones that are found in the demo, but add the zone account, in this case, for the SIA format 98-01-0004. By adding this zone account, or SIA zone account, to our base account, we put ourselves in a position where we don't have to program all the different possible zones that the SIA format can entail. This could literally save us hundreds of entries for each account that we put in. Let's move to the second page, the zone page, so we can get a good feel for the way this format works. I've done a few things here to help us understand some of the basics. Number one, the area identifier for the SIA Level 2, which is the most prominent level right now, is the last character. In this last character of the transfer coming over from the receiver situation, we will take and combine within the SIMS2 interrupt-driven protocols the area identifier and the actual zone itself. So we can take up to the first 6 characters to identify any information about a zone, but the last character will be the area identifier. In this case, we've taken a number 1 with 6 question marks in front of it, put a message identifier, and said this zone description is now as an area 1 redirection. Going from there, I might go down here to my partition account number and put in 97-01-0001 to identify the partition 1 for this particular account. This is kind of a standard way that we've suggested that people do their different redirections, but then we also have many customers that will keep the same account number and add a 5th digit, which they might identify as the area identifier, the subzone for the account number. Note that the SIA account, or the SIA format, can have anywhere from a single digit to a 6-digit account number. The standard interpretation for the SIMS program is going to be to provide you with a 4-digit account number and the least significant 4-digit account numbers no matter what you put in. This is to overcome situations in the field where installers or dealers may not really understand the programming, and they'll put in just a 1 in there and expect it to come in as 0001. If you want the full capabilities of the account number formatting for your SIA, simply contact the SIMS support personnel, and this can be done for you. There is no limitation in the program. It's just a standard configuration set up the way we've done it. Also, you'll note that there are special identifiers in your receiver. The number 4 will force everything to be 4 digits, even when it's more, 5, so forth like that. Those are particulars that were probably better addressed with your SIMS support personnel than in a video we currently have in front of us. I'm going to erase this account number because I don't really have any partition account numbers in there right now, and it's just going to tell me that I don't. But if I go here, notice that this first entry is for area 1. The second entry is for area 2. An A will be for area 10, a Z for area 36, and so forth. If you're going to redirect any signals out of your base account to somewhere else, they should be the first entries in the zone list, so that those redirections will take place. Most of the time when we redirect areas, we're going to redirect all signals to a different account number. Note that in that other account number, the one that we're redirecting from the base to the sub-account, we also want to use that same zone account for our SIA information. So that if I wanted to put a zone in the base account, I might put it in something like this. FA, of course, in SIA language is fire alarm. And then if it were zone 01, and then I might fill it out with question marks at the end, so that I will pick up any other area. Note that when you're doing zones, we must get a full character for character match. That's the reason above that I've put 6 question marks and a 1 or 6 question marks and a 2, so that whatever is in those first 6 characters, if there's a 1 as the last character, it's going to send it somewhere else, or a 2 and so forth like that. But if I'm only redirecting, as I've done right above there, areas 1, 2, 10, and 36, and I want any other area to be identified in the base account, then I put the subsequent question mark at the end. Now, the one thing that's noteworthy about the SIA format, and a bone of contention or a confusing factor, is I can't have an FA1 or I can have an FA01, or I can go so far as to have a fire alarm on 001, or to the nth degree 0001. Now, this is a panel piece of information here. Please understand that these panels, SIAs in particular, open up a portal through these receivers. And they open it up, and once it's open, that SIA code comes out of that panel, is passed directly through that receiver and on to the automation. And there is no reformatting done inside of the receiver. That is a factor of the panel, and as we get more and more panel manufacturers on the marketplace, the original SIA protocols and SIA instructions or identifiers that were done are twisted and turned, and the SIA that you have today, or that we see today, is not the same SIA there was 10 years ago. There are certain liberties that have been taken on this SIA protocol, and we must work our way through those types of things. Now, also, a lot of times you may see this come in simply as an FA1. That's the reason I like to put in the question marks after that, just to take care of the unknowns. But please note that an FA1 0 is going to be identified, in this case an FA 10 through 19 would be identified in the same zone. So there are some twists and turns here, and I know that when you're dealing with signals coming in, we don't always have a chance to test them all out. But you really have to query your installers about how they're doing that. And once you get familiar with it, or the panels that they're using, they'll either left justify the signals or they'll right justify the signals with preceding zeros. There's no way in the automation for us to know exactly what to do on those, because it is in fact possible to program a panel for an FA1 and an FA01. These are possibilities in panel programming for some of the manufacturers. Now, originally in the SIA Level 1 protocol, I might have had something like an FA1, and I might have had then that to be followed up with an open group 1. There might have been a separate opening. These are all in SIA Level 1 separate signals that come through, and they come through to the automation one at a time. When we're using SIA Level 2, we might get a full string of signals that come in that the automation can then use some intelligence on and group them together, put them together with the area information, and allow the redirections. If you're dealing with SIA level 1, in the case of a DVAC, a SureGuard DVAC, that is SIA level 1, and there's no way to permanently tie these signals together. If you have the ability to suggest that your dealers and customers use SIA level 2, please do so. It will save you a lot of pain and provide a much easier and understandable sequence coming in, especially, absolutely, it's imperative if there is area information going to be transmitted again, so that we can tie these things together and redirect them together. If you're using the SureGuard DVAC, note that just by definition of the way some of the direct wire or the multiplexing type signal systems work, they may go out and interrogate a panel, get one signal in, which might be an opening. They will then continue around through the loop of all other panels and then come around and ask for the second part of the information, which might be the group identifier. And the only way we can tie these things together and know that we're doing the right thing on the interpretation of these signals is if they're all done in one transfer. We have some way to know that they're pending transfers. In the case of some of these systems, there really is just no way to know. If you're dealing in SIA level 3, note that the description that you might be programming in here, fire alarm general, is actually located outside of the panel, and that information be transferred in. In those cases, whatever is in the zone description is going to be overridden by what comes into the panel. In those cases, the panels may be programmed, or the actual user numbers and all those type identifiers are controlled within the panel. So even though they're sending you a user 1, you may not know who it is inside of the SIMS2 database, but the fact that they transmit the name in with it will allow it to be written into history and actioned on the screen just as if it were in the database. And in the SIA level 3 case, if it's a fire and they actually transmit some other information about the fire, wherever this fire zone is located and so forth, it will appear in the dispatch and action screens up on the traffic display. This is much the same fashion that we deal with the DMP formats and the transmission of English language there. Now, while we're on this particular fire alarm zone 1, and I can just put some sort of description back in there, note that FR is going to be the restoral for this particular zone. It is a good idea to put the restoral codes on the same line as opposed to letting them pass on into the zone account. If you do this, you'll find out that your unrestoreds or other types of situations that you're going to keep track of are always going to work much more smoothly, and they will only restore the particular zone that's located on that line as opposed to trying to use that signal in another separate line there. I'd like to take a minute now and just actually go over to the SIA zone account, where we can just take a little look at the different types of signal. Here in the SIA zone account, I've given a little bit of understanding about the first signal there is something like the question marks, with the A being the area and so forth like that. Now, notice here that a BA is going to be restored by the BR, and a burglary cancel is a BC. Now, you'll see the way these work, and I really do suggest that you take the time to look at all of these zones and the way they're in here. That's all part of the understanding of the SIA format. And you'll notice there's a lot of them in there. There's differences between arms and forced arms and so forth like that. Most opening closing signals, bypass signals and such should always be left up to the zone account. In the base account, you only want those zones that are indigenous to that particular panel, so that if your dealer put in, or your installer put in an 8 zones, just 8 zones in that panel for different places in the house, you want to identify those 8 zones. But you don't want to identify panel tampers and battery signals and power signals and wireless test signals or all kinds of tests, let those always go to the zone account. Limit yourself to only identifying what zones are necessary in the base account, or only those redirections in the base account that are necessary. Let's just say if we had no redirections involved, we had 8 zones in the panel that we installed, I would imagine that I would only have 8 zones identified in my base account. I would have my zone account identified to pick up anything else that I perhaps might have missed. If you look through these, you're going to just see lots of different capabilities of the zones. If you go all the way down to the end, we'll find the single character identifiers. If our zone account cannot find the signal that comes in somewhere at the top in the 2 character zones, it will always default down. There are some SIA panels, for example, that might send in a space A for an alarm zone. They don't really identify that it's a burglary or that it's a fire or that it's a tamper or whatever like that. So when you're putting in your zones, again, this is very similar to the contact ID. Let's go back to our account that we created. If you know that zone 1, you don't know what it's going to transmit in, but you know your alarm zone 1 is a fire, you could set it up like that. You don't have to put that FA up there, and you could in fact go over to here and put a question mark R1, so that you don't have to get hung up in these 2 character identifiers. The purpose of the 2 character identifiers was very similar to the contact ID event codes. They were intended to provide some sort of English interpretation on the printers as the signals came in. But with today's automation, they don't really serve the same kind of purpose unless you're dealing with openings and closings. So you have that kind of capability to do that. Again, just talking again, if this were a fire alarm 1 and I knew that was all, and I might do that and it'll catch that area information that we mentioned before, for that would only be for SIA level 2 and 2 and 3, of course. Okay, I'd like to take this time to thank you for sitting in on this, and I hope it's been beneficial in your understanding of the SIA code format.